Oh.
Hello, my name is Deborah Dwork, and I am the director of the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at the Graduate Center, City University of New York. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the second in a series of virtual events to amplify Besieged Voices from Ukraine. We hear from historians, artists, and journalists on the ground under attack. From these intrepid individuals, we learn about the complexity of lives disrupted and the experience of unfolding war. We keep contact. We keep listening. I am honored and I am humbled to thank our Ukrainian colleagues, Iya, Olga, and Eugeny, for their generosity and their determination to speak to us. And I thank you, everyone who has joined. You show your support through your presence. This event is hosted in association with the Center for Jewish Studies at the Graduate Center, CUNY, the School of General Studies and Graduate Education, and the Master of Arts in Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Stockton University in New Jersey, and the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the USHMM. I am grateful for our shared effort. Time is short and the matter is grave. Without further ado, I turn to the co-chairs of our panel, Elissa Bemporad, Professor of History and Ungar Professor in Eastern European Jewish History and Holocaust at Queens College and the Graduate Center, and Dr. Natalya Lazar, Director of the Initiative on Ukrainian Jewish Shared History and the Holocaust in Ukraine at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Elissa and Natalya, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Let me begin by saying that during war and genocide, acts of resistance can take multiple forms. Words, both spoken and written, can be used to resist war and genocide. Writing and speaking words of truth are acts of resistance. Words help us make sense of the events, understand them, remember them, but also counter lies and disinformation, and to cope with violence and destruction. On this 120th day since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the intent of which is genocidal, I am deeply thankful for the words of resistance that our three distinguished speakers have been crafting for all of us. So let me briefly introduce them for all of you. Our first speaker is Olga Tokariuk, who is an independent journalist and fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis based in Ukraine. Her expertise includes international relations and disinformation research. She has vast experience working with Ukrainian and international media, and her reports have appeared in many publications, including Time, The Washington Post, The Daily Beast, BuzzFeed News, The Evening Standard from the UK, F is Spain, and Il Foglio and ANSA from Italy. She is a former head of foreign news desk at the independent Ukrainian Hromadske TV. Our second speaker
Our apologies for technical interruption. We'll just give him a minute for Elissa to reestablish connection. Well, apologies for that. I will take over from here and we'll introduce our second distinguished speaker, Professor Eugeny Kotlyar, who holds a PhD. He's a professor at the Department of Monumental Painting at the Department of Art History of Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Art, curator of the Center for Eastern Studies, editor-in-chief of the Bulletin of the Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Art, and a member of the International Association of Art Critics, the National Union of Artists of Ukraine, the Union of Designers of Ukraine, and the head of the academic board of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies. His main field of research is Jewish heritage in Ukraine, Jewish art, synagogue, wall painting decoration, and Kharkiv Jewish local lore. He's the author of about 2,000 publications, articles, books, and edited volumes. Dr. Kotler has participated in numerous congresses and conferences in Europe, North America, and Israel. He is a known authority in the field of Jewish heritage and Jewish culture in Ukraine. He is trained as an artist in monumental arts and as an art historian. He has participated as a designer and state glass artist to restore synagogues and Jewish community centers in many cities of Ukraine. Created of art and educational exhibition, and particular of Jewish art created exhibition in several Jewish museums in Kharkiv, including the multimedia space of the memorial Drobetsky Yar in Kharkiv. Apologies. And last but not least, our third speaker. Apologies, I'm also having some. Our third speaker is Iya Kiva, a poet, translator, and a journalist. She was born in Donetsk and has lived for the last 8 years since the summer of 2015 in the capital of Ukraine, in Kiev. From the March of this year, she relocated to Lviv. Iya writes in both Russian and Ukrainian. She is the author of 2 collections of the poetry, Padalsha Atraya, Father from Heaven, published in 2018, and Перша сторінка зими, the first page of winter, as well as a book of interviews with Belarus writers. Ми прокинемось іншими, розмови з сучасними білоруськими письменниками. We will awaken as others, discussions with contemporary Belarus authors about the past, present, and the future of Belarus. Kiva is a member of the PEN Ukraine. Her poetry has been translated into more than 25 languages. She is a translator of Belarus and Polish poetry and essay. Iya contributes to the program PG Library as editor and translator of children's books from English to Ukrainian. She has received various international and Ukrainian awards and has participated in a variety of festivals and competitions, including the International Poetry Festival, Emigrantskaya Lyria, an international poetry competition, Hayvoronina. It is a great pleasure to welcome all of you today to our discussions, and I would like to address to our audience. Please post your questions into Q&A chat. We will make sure to raise your question during the Q&A period. Thank you. Elissa is back. Elissa, would you like to continue?
Yes, apologies. Apologies, really, I don't know what happened. Anyway, I thought that we would begin with a question for our speakers and then open up to the questions from the audience. As Natalya said, please add the questions to the Q&A feature at the bottom of the page. So I will ask the question, and maybe Olga will go first, then followed by Yevgeny, and then Iya. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experience of the war, personal, professional, or both. What has happened to you since the beginning of the war, and how has the war changed your work? Olga, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Elissa, and thank you for inviting me to this very important event. It's a great responsibility to be the first speaker on this panel. I will share my, both personal and professional impressions of this 4 months of war. I didn't prepare remarks in advance, so I'll keep it pretty informal, please. don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them. I want it to be, an interactive discussion rather than just me, making a statement. So Elissa already introduced me. I'm a journalist with more than 15 years of experience in journalism. And mostly I was covering international news for Ukrainian media, but in recent years, I was mostly working with international media as a freelance correspondent in Ukraine, speaking and writing about what is happening in my country. And, I've been following the news about Russia's buildup on Ukraine's border since last year. Maybe you remember that back in May last year, there was the first Russian buildup. And then in the autumn again, another Russian buildup at Ukrainian border. So this news of a possible invasion, full-scale invasion has been there. I've been covering it for a while. And for at least since last November, I was writing about that. I was interviewing different experts in Ukraine and myself trying to figure out, is this invasion possible? Is the full-scale war in Europe that has not been seen for decades, for at least the Balkan wars, but even from the World War II, is it possible? And also I had to find an answer for myself personally. If it is possible, if it happens, what should I do? How should I prepare for it? How should I plan as a person, as a mother, as a wife, and also as a journalist, as a professional, as a Ukrainian. Thanks to the fact that I was integrated somehow into this kind of community of, had a lot of contacts both in foreign media and also with international think tanks and analysts. I think I took this threat of Russian full-scale invasion more seriously than many of my compatriots in Ukraine, who tended to underestimate the fact that Russia could launch this massive invasion, that it could launch such a genocidal campaign as it is conducting now. I remember couple of weeks prior to February 24th, I was reading a report by, USI, Royal Institute from the UK, that was outlining how this Russian full-scale invasion could look like. And, they were writing things that Russians are combining the lists of people that they want to persecute, that they would be going after activists, journalists, that they have kill lists, and that, they have plans for all territory of Ukraine, that they have plans to replace Ukrainian government with some puppet authority, and, that they are intent on really conduct a massive campaign of murder and killing of Ukrainian civilian population. And, I read it and well, on the one hand, it was really scary, but then I thought, well, it's very difficult to imagine something like this could happen. So, it seemed all unimaginable and unthinkable. So, but after February 24th, me and, millions of Ukrainians and people across the world realized that what seemed unthinkable and unbelievable and unimaginable still in the beginning of this year has become a possibility. What we are seeing, Russia is conducting a massive campaign of, murder of civilians. It's razing Ukrainian cities to the ground. It's bombing Ukrainian cities across all the country with missiles. It's deporting hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian, children to Russia, basically trying to erase their Ukrainian identity. And on the territory it managed to occupy, it also conducts a massive campaign of extrajudicial killings, torture, rape of civilian population, including elderly and children. So the first, thing that how this war changed my life is that I realized that what seemed unthinkable and unimaginable can happen. And that's also, a message I want to convey to you today. Do not, feel like things, wars and, genocide are things of the past. That these things do not concern your country. It may happen. We are seeing in Ukraine that it is happening. And even for us Ukrainians, it's hard to completely accept and grasp this reality, but it's a reality today. Then coming to my personal experience of this war, well, me as millions of Ukrainians, I was forced to flee my hometown, Kyiv. I relocated to Western Ukraine, to Chernivtsi, where I'm originally from. It's a city actually with a rich Jewish heritage. Unfortunately, very little Jewish population has remained here today, also as a result of, Holocaust and emigration during the Soviet period. And then after the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of Jewish population left the city, but, it's still this heritage is present. So I fled here with my family, first of all, in order to take care of my daughter, who is now 7 years old. And I had to reassess also, my work as a journalist. I was never a war reporter, and I never wanted to be one, actually. This is not my specialty. I do not feel like going to the front line and covering the war. These are risks that I am not ready to undertake. It might be a cowardly position, especially in comparison to many of my outstanding, brave colleagues from Ukraine who are doing that. I admire their work. I admire their sacrifice. I admire the fact that they are risking their lives and are sometimes losing their lives in an attempt, to cover this war, to tell the world what is really happening. But I'm trying to do what I can and what, I can do best, being here in the relative safety of Western Ukraine. Of course, the safety is not total. Actually, I'm speaking to you from a basement. I made my workplace here in a basement because there are air raid sirens that are quite often heard even here in Western Ukraine. Just today, we had 2 of them. So in order not to interrupt, my speeches and interviews, I made this makeshift office here in the basement, and I'm, speaking from here with you today. So I'm trying to do what I can, being here in Western Ukraine, telling the world what is happening in Ukraine. And I particularly focus on the issue of human rights violations and war crimes. I partnered with the Ukrainian human rights defenders who have been documenting Russian war crimes and human rights abuses since the war started in 2014, because actually Russia's war against Ukraine started back in 2014, not on February 24th. The full-scale invasion began in February 24th, but Russia has been waging war against Ukraine for 8 years. So I partnered with these human rights organizations, and I'm, trying to amplify Ukrainian voices on my social media, on my Twitter, and also by contributing to international media, telling the stories of Ukrainians who are resisting very bravely against the enemy that, at least at the first glance, looks so much stronger, and hoping and believing in Ukraine's victory and doing everything they can for this victory. Personally, I'm very inspired by my fellow Ukrainians, and it was also a difficult decision for me. Should I stay in Ukraine for the sake also of my daughter, or should I go abroad? But I decided that I want to stay in Ukraine as long as it is relatively safe for my child, because also I feel that here I have more kind of credibility and more, my voice is heard louder being here in Ukraine, not being abroad. So I'm taking maybe minor, but still risks by staying here in Ukraine. But I feel like it's my duty to be with my people in this difficult time, to be inside my country, in this difficult time, and do my best as a journalist to make their stories heard and known across the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga, for sharing this. And again, for, what you said, what seems unthinkable and unimaginable can happen. It can happen to anyone. That's so powerful. And, coming from you, you've been following the war since, for years. And even for you, this was unimaginable. So, that is very powerful. So thank you again for sharing your voice and your words, and your work is so inspiring. Eugeny, if you would like to go next, that would be great. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elissa. Thank you, Natalya. Good afternoon, everyone. I have prepared a little presentation, and I want to show it, if I can. Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you for the invitation to join this event. I try to put myself in the shoes of our audience in order to understand what our viewers would be interested in learning. As a person of visual culture, I would like to show you a photo as a background to our conversation. It was taken in Iya Kiva, where I and my family live now. On this photo, you see my daughter reading a sign on that anti-tank hedgehog, warning unexploded ammunition. In the background, you can see a monument to the victims of the Holocaust. I see this as a symbol of the future that looks on the tragedy of the past through the prism of the present. Before February 24, all these modes of time were different. Now they have lost stability. The terrible past has ceased to be distanced and has returned to our lives. The present time is shrouded in fear, confusion, and at the same time an inner sense of heroism. The future is full of uncertainty. No one could have imagined that the horrors and scales of the wars of the last century would return to our lives and give us a different perception of history and modernity, a different worldview. One thing I can say for sure is that the war made us all Ukrainians, truly uniting East and West of Ukraine. For me, a Russian-speaking Jew who was brought up primarily in the context of Russian and Soviet culture, when the Jewish culture has then banned, this was a big transformation that continues to this day. And this happens on both collective and personal levels of a concern for the fate of my country, my family, and my own. I don't want to go anywhere. I love my country. I have a lot to do here, including study and promotion of the Jewish culture and Jewish heritage. On the eve of war, we were in Kharkiv. In the evening of February 23rd, I went to bed late. I made a big to-do list for the next day. Early morning explosions canceled all these plans. I immediately thought of June 22nd, 1941, when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. I thought of my relatives who were killed in Kamenets-Podilsky in August 1941. My grandfather who died in the war, and my grandmother who fled with 2 small children in the evacuation. I thought of many other things. All of this escaped from a deep history into a parallel with the present in one single moment. Just a moment. In the first hours, I already witnessed images that impressed me as an artist. 80 lines, empty shelves at stores, a bomb shelter in the metro, a note posted by a neighbor on our door. Good news, spring will be here in 5 days. We continue to live between panic and hope. We have already gone through several stages of life during the war, from shock and confusion to regaining focus and ability to make short-term plans and desire to take control over our lives. We lived under the bombs for about a week, but then rockets started to hit really close. We escaped the city by car with 2 children. It took us almost a week to cover a distance that in peaceful times we covered in 13 hours. We planned our route as we went, avoiding highways that could have been targeted by Russian army from north, east, and west. Our path took us through former shtetls where we stayed at night. Uman, Midжилиш. I knew and I loved these places. I had researched and written about monuments here. Before the war, I brought artists to workshop to these locations. At the moment, with all my body, I felt as if it were our ancestors, these dynasties of Hasidic tzaddiks, who led us through the rescuous Jewish tunnel. I wrote an essay about this feeling for Jewish Heritage Europe's website. Soon we reached Lviv, where we found a shelter in the apartment of my friends. It was there, in comfort and safety, that I was able to come to my senses and evaluate my situation. All that I took with, besides my family documents, money, and a few personal belongings, was a single book that I grabbed in haste. It was my guide, Jewish Kharkiv. This book meant everything to me, memory of my hometown, my ancestors, many years of painstaking research and work. It was painful to see that as we were running away from the war to the west, Russian troops were destroying the world in which I lived and created for synagogues, Holocaust memorial, centers of modern Jewish life. I also took my laptop and hard drive. Without them, I couldn't continue to work. It's my depository. It is my memory, my experience, and my professional connections. This is my starting point. Before the war, I led up to 10 projects related to Jewish culture, art, education, and research. All of them were frozen in the first month of war. It soon became clear that we needed to change, mobilize our forces and strengths, reorganize, adjust lines of communications, and look for new opportunities for life and work. As a professor at the Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Arts, I supervise undergraduate and graduate students. I also edit a journal. The Academy leadership located to Lviv and manages the university remotely. The experience of working online during the COVID-19 pandemic has been a huge help to us. Relatively quickly, we managed to reconnect and reestablish teaching process with our students in different parts of Ukraine and Europe. Currently, our graduate students are preparing for virtual thesis defense. Another group of students left for Turkey to paint walls of the university, whom I supervised from a distance. As a military conscript, I cannot leave the country. I'm thinking of organizing a virtual art exhibition for several art projects because hosting a physical one is currently impossible. In the period, most of my Jewish-related projects were connected with the reconstruction of synagogues and stained glass windows, design of museum exhibitions and spaces, research and promotion of knowledge about Jewish heritage of Ukraine, in Ukraine. Some of these projects can be seen at Academia Edu website. Lately, I have been working with my colleagues on several projects that deal with the representation of Holocaust memory using digital technologies. We have almost completed a multimedia design project for the Holocaust memorial in Drobetsky Yar in Kharkiv. The project consists of the audiovisual design, film, and interactive museum. We have also initiated a project with British musicologists to produce a virtual project, Drobetsky Yar. The project focuses on creating a sound memory of Kharkiv's Jewish community, connecting it with animation and interactive content. And finally, another project with Israeli partners that aimed to digitally visualize the Holocaust remembrance in Kharkiv was about to start. All these projects came to an end with the beginning of the war, but they did not lose its importance. We are looking for opportunities to implement these projects within the framework of a new situation. Today we are in Kyiv, where we moved a month ago to be closer to our hometown. In the last 4 months, this is the third place of home for me. We have learned to live with a few things, without home, security, my archive, and library. My work office is a balcony with a view on TV tower in the Babin Yar, from which I started my story. I look at my situation not only as a challenge, but also as a window of opportunities choice in new circumstances. There is a huge interest for Ukraine. Western world tries to understand the Ukrainians who desperately and heroically defend themselves and all of Ukraine. This is a rare and historic chance for the entire country and personally for me to make a breakthrough in Europe to demonstrate our history and culture, including Jewish, to share our values and achievements. Of course, we are still at the very beginning of the journey and we don't know our next challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eugeny, for sharing your, about this journey, the journey of evacuation through the lens of Jewish history in Ukraine, and also for this discussion of how intertwined war and creativity are. I would now like to invite our third speaker. Iya, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elissa. Thank you, Natalya. Good evening for everybody. I will read from paper, and I thank Natalya for help in translation. I was born and lived for most of my life in Donetsk, but because of the Russian-Ukrainian war, I was forced to leave my hometown in 2014. I left it for security reasons, mostly because of ongoing occupation, war hostilities, but also because of hints from my acquaintances to hand me over to the separatists for my Ukrainian position. I made a personal choice to live in the so-called the Donetsk People's Republic and not be responsible for what is happening there. It's impossible. I lost my home and remnants of my family memory, photos, books, personal belongings. I lost feeling of security and safety. I lost health. The war not only kills at front, it also destroys our bodies in the rear. In 2022, due to the circumstances, I found myself in Lviv. Before last February, I had lived in Kiev for almost 8 years. Once my ancestors fled from the west to the east of Ukraine, escaping from the Nazism and the Holocaust. My family roots are from Berdichev. I had to flee in the opposite direction, escaping from Russian aggression and Russian fascism. I call the last 8 years of my life stolen by Russia youth. It is incredibly difficult to work with words today. You have no right to fall into pathos, heroism, propaganda, aestheticization, or appropriation of another's experience. There were similar challenges in 2014, but then the poetic work was more of a struggle for visibility of a Russian-Ukrainian war, not only in the world, but also inside of Ukraine. Today, when the war can be watched online anywhere in the world, then the scale of the war has changed. We have to reconfigure the relationship with it to explain who you are in this war, what you are doing, and how do you feel. For example, I'm a civilian volunteer, but there's nothing to write about. It is a slow, real work. However, I often dedicated more time to volunteering than to literature, or as much. It seems to me that authors who think that literature is something kind and unattainable are not worthy of listening and reading. Another literary and cultural challenge today is to return words via meaning. After all, a person who says, I am scared in Lviv, and a person who says the same in Mariupol talk about different things. This difference has to be grasped, understood, and explained. And in the same way, words need to regain weight because war is reducing everything like in microscope. It makes our daily activities small, unimportant, insignificant. Of course, in reality, it is not like that, but that's how a great shock works. It seems to sweep away all words from the dictionary, and we see only blank page instead of a large book with words. Finally, I would like to add that literature works with imagination, but today any photo from Kiev, Kharkiv, Mariupol, Bucha, Borodyanka, Kherson, Mykolaiv, or Donetsk speaks for itself. After all, this is the first war in the history of mankind which will be documented so carefully. And also we can read and listen to victims and to combatants on both sides. Today, literature, including poetry, deals with fixation, documentation, and testimony. It works on the border of fiction and non-fiction. Personally, it is difficult for me to think of text after February 24 as a poetry. There is no enough distance between how I relive this period and how I think of it. In fact, there is no time for such thoughts, especially today when reality changes so fast and Ukraine intensively writes its history. And of course, now I ask myself whether literature can change anything, whether poetry can make a difference, whether they have the power to oppose the deeds. If I were asked at the moment what is more important, hemostatic agent or poetry, I would have answered it is a hemostatic agent. And I want to read one of my poems translated by Catherine Young. It was read in 2016. Is there hot war in the tap? Is there cold war in the tap? How? Is it that there is absolutely no war? It was promised for after lunch. We saw the announcement with our own eyes. War will arrive at 1400 hours. And it's already 3 hours without war, 6 hours without war. What is, there's no war by the time night falls. We can't do laundry without war, can't make dinner, can't drink tea plain without war. And it's already 8 days without war. We smell bad. Our wives don't want to lie in bed with us. The children have forgotten to smile and complain. Why did we always think we'd never run out of war? Let's start. Let's start visiting neighbors to borrow war. On the other side of our green park, start fearing to spill war in the roads, start considering life without war a temporary hardship. In this parts it's considered unnatural if war doesn't course through the pipes into every house, into every throat. Thank you.
Thank you, Iya. Thank you for a powerful reading. Thank you to you, to Eugeny and Olga. We have questions coming from the audience in our Q&A. And the first question that came from our Russian-speaking viewer, and could be probably addressed to all of our presenters today, but perhaps, well, one of you, or if you want to answer, please jump in. The question is about the role of the propaganda, and I think it's what Olga was saying, that Ukrainians at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, actually, and even before having all these warnings, struggle with grasping on the idea that the war was possible. So another issue, at least that's how I see, and perhaps our viewer would agree, we would try to understand the Russian views on this war, what actually moved them, what is driving them. And our viewer is asking, do you think that the cause for the war has become the propaganda of the highest level? How can one avoid the influence of propaganda in the closed country, the poor country, where the majority of people never traveled and saw the world, and where many people trust only information that they receive from TV? I don't know, perhaps Olga or any of you wanna
Yes, well, if I understand correctly, the Maxim who asked this question was referring to Russia and the propaganda in Russia. Well, I think the propaganda didn't cause the war, but the propaganda was an instrument to make this war acceptable in the eyes of Russian population and of Russian soldiers who were then sent to Ukraine to invade, kill, rape, loot, and torture. Obviously, the idea and the decision to wage this war, to launch this full-scale invasion was not made by the people who are doing propaganda. It was made at the highest level of Russian leadership. But the state propagandists, people who work on Russian state TV and Russian state-controlled media, of course, they were spreading and they were preparing the population for this war for years. And in my opinion, they should also be held accountable as war criminals, as people who, are responsible for murder of Ukrainians in in the future, at some tribunal that hopefully will be created, like Nuremberg Tribunal after the World War II. Obviously, and this genocidal propaganda still continues. Well, in Russia, for years, Ukraine was described as a failed state, as a very corrupt country. Ukrainians were dehumanized. They were compared with, on some occasions, even with insects. This is a tool that has been used in Rwanda, for example, during the genocide there by their media. So the worst examples of propaganda used by Russia against Ukraine that somehow helped to make the war acceptable, made the killing of Ukrainians acceptable, they were there for 8 years, and unfortunately they were paid very little attention to beyond Ukraine and Russia in the West. When Ukrainian also experts on disinformation propaganda, they were trying to speak about that, they were very, very rarely listened to, but it was there in the making. And that's why I think it's so important to listen what Russian state TV and Russian propaganda is saying today, because very often they announce their plans, they announce their intentions. And coming to your question, how can the population of the country that is bombarded with this propaganda resist? Well, it's very difficult to answer that question, and especially if we are speaking about the country that is not a democracy, and Russia obviously isn't. It's not just that the media are state controlled. There is also a huge repression machine. All kind of critical thinking is not just discouraged, but people are persecuted for dissent. They are jailed. There is no opposition. Like starting on a very basic level, of course, like critical thinking, developing critical thinking on a personal level, maybe parents educating their children, because obviously the school education, the public education system, the critical thinking is not taught. Trying to also, of course, speaking foreign languages help, because then you can read sources of information that are not only in your language, in Russian language, in the language of state propaganda media, but you can get information from other sources in other languages. So a very, just one of the answers and one of the possible solutions, but better education, critical thinking, these are the tools that could help fight propaganda and resist propaganda.
Thank you, Olga. We have a lot of comments, a lot of messages of support, also personal messages and questions from our audience. Unfortunately, I don't think we will have time to answer all of them. So I will pick just 2 questions, and then we will turn to Iya. But the first questions are actually one question for all panelists is coming from Paul, and how do the presenters keep up their morale in the face of the horrific obscenity and this merciless invasion all around them? This is the question. Anyone? Iya, Євгеній, як ви справляєтеся, як ви підтримуєте свій моральний стан, коли навколо відбуваються такі страшні події? Anyone of you want to answer? I'll translate.
You're muted. Oh, I think you're muted, Eugeny.
Пане Євгене, ви включіть мікрофон.
Дякую. У мене відповідь така. Це було дуже важко зробити у перший місяць війни.
It was very difficult to keep morale up, especially in the first months of the invasion.
Хоча зараз я кажу про мене та про мою родину, але поруч багато моїх друзів, у яких дуже різне становище, дуже різне, від повного відчаю до розуміння, що далі робити.
Of course, I can speak right now only about my family and our experience, but among our friends and also close acquaintances, we see that situation varies from a full despair.
Те, що я сьогодні демонстрував у презентації, це моя така головна ідея, в принципі, і мотив існування під час війни. Це розуміння того, що зараз час, який, так би мовити, коштує, як десятиліття. Ми можемо дуже багато зробити, і я просто відчуваю, можливо, десь якусь свою місію, свою роль в цьому. І це мене підтримує.
I try to convey this idea also in my presentation that we are living through unique times, through unique opportunities, or the period that gives us a unique opportunities, as strange as it may sound, actually, of some new challenges and new improvements. And I see my mission in doing something and making a change.
І останнє, що я хочу сказати з цього приводу, що людина до всього звикає. Ми зараз просто живемо, коли кожного дня, а то і 2, і 3 рази на день лунають повітряні тривоги. І ми навіть їх не помічаємо, бо просто потрібно щось робити, і все, ми вже звикли до цього.
Yeah, human beings, the social animals that quickly get used to things that are happening around them. And right now we are hearing the air raid sirens a few times a day, but we already accept them as normal.
Але в мене є трошки таке відчуття вини. Це те, що мої друзі, мої колеги залишилися у Харкові, а ми навіть поїхали. І це відчуття, воно просто з'явилося, коли ми перетинали кордон Харківської області, де вже не стріляли, де вже негатив.
I have this very strong feeling that also shows a difference in my experience and also of my colleagues who remain in Kharkiv region. And as soon as we crossed the border of the Kharkiv region when with my family we were leaving, I already could feel a difference. That territory wasn't targeted. Дякую, пане Євген. Ія, ви хочете щось сказати? Чим?
Я кажу, що перше запитання було цікавіше.
Перше питання це було, як ви справляєтеся, як ви підтримуєте свій моральний дух, коли навколо, про що ви говорили?
Я, по-перше, скажу, що для мене війна почалася не в 14-му, не в 22-му, а в 14-му. Тому, відповідно, цикл психологічних станів, які зараз переживають люди, я вже його проходила.
First of all, I would like to stress that for me personally, the war started in 2014, not in 2022. So this is not the first time that I'm struggling psychologically with these challenges, that I have to overcome them.
Потім мені здається, що це такий час, коли, якщо ти вже не зовсім погана людина, дуже мало хто думає про себе. У нас навіть є такі жарти, вже меми почалися: я роблю недостатньо, я роблю ще недостатніше, і так далі, і так далі.
Yeah, there's of course this feeling that we start to make fun of jokes around that we don't do enough, that we don't contribute enough, that there are memes already going in the circle of the friends and also on the social media.
І я пам'ятаю, що тут теж варто пам'ятати, зараз просто спад на якісь волонтерські запити є в цивільному просторі, але от на початку ми вимірювали ефективність, наприклад, чи як вдалий день, якщо ти хоча б комусь, хоча б одній людині в чомусь змогла допомогти. І так от було.
Of course, today one might say that there is a decline of the volunteer activities, but there was a time when we considered a good day, a productive day, when we were able to help at least someone.
І зараз це так, але змінилася інтенсивність, і я думаю, що є така метафора, воно вже артикулювалося багатьма людьми, метафора колективного тіла. Ми настільки відчуваємо наші міста і наших людей, якби без часу, що ти постійно думаєш, що ти можеш зробити на будь-якому рівні, там, де ти є.
I have, well, the entire country and cities and groups are experiencing, going through similar challenges, and there's already an understanding or metaphor for collective body that we are forming all together, and our feelings and emotions are thinking in a way. Sorry, правильно я переклала чи не зовсім?
Не знаю, мені здається, дуже щось було близько. А другий момент, що треба теж розуміти, що це так доволі болісний момент, який я зараз озвучу, що ми зрештою все-таки вимірюємо себе і свій досвід порівнюєш за максимумом. Да? Якщо ти не вбитий, не поранений, не зґвалтований, то більш-менш з тобою що там триматися? Тобто з тобою більш-менш все добре. У нас перед очима настільки страшні речі, страшні долі, і зараз, і в майбутньому ми розуміємо, що це травма на десятиліття, що теж ти, а що триматися? Ти кажеш, зі мною нічого такого не сталося, вон з тим сталося, а той каже, ні, за мною теж нічого не сталося. Тобто завжди треба пам'ятати, що справді є великі втрати і є менші, і вони різні.
We have to understand that losses are different, and when you see what happened to others who were raped, who were killed, who lost their family members, you understand your own quote-unquote luck. It didn't happen to you. So you're already in a better, so to say, situation. And we also understand that this war is for a longer period, and the trauma, and we will learn even more horrific episodes about this war in the future. So we don't have another choice as to hold on.
І єдиний момент, що я додам, що цього разу, на відміну від 2014 року, кількість психосоматичних реакцій через інтенсивність бойових дій вже за 3 місяці просто зашкалює. Я роблю паузу.
Yeah, and of course, another large difference if we compare the events of 2014 and 2022, that right now we are the invasion produced so many radical psychomatic responses on collective level. I will add just from me on the national level, and that's of course a huge difference.
Як це проявляється у людей, як і в 14-му, це так зване, коли проблеми з серцем, які не реєструються жодним ЕКГ, випадають масово волосся в жінок, випадають проблеми з зубами, всіх псуються зуби, проблеми з судомами, розлади сну і так далі. То я кажу просто абсолютно іншу річ, що навіть якщо ти в тилу десь, то це не означає, що ти не переживаєш все це дуже тілесно.
Yeah. So the point that Iya is making is that it doesn't matter where you are, but the entire nation, citizens of Ukraine are going through very drastic psychological experience, and many symptoms are going unregistered. The heart, the pain of the heart, women are losing their hair, dental problems, or insult and cardiovascular diseases. They are on the rise right now. Iya, would you mind reading to us your second poem before we will turn to Deborah? Почитайте двоє, якщо.
Я спробую. This poem was translated by Amelia Lazar and Iya Kiva. We packed a contraband humanitarian aid kit over songs and shipped it to Europe, America, India, and China, paving the Silk Road with great Ukrainian literature. What have you got there, brothers? They asked at the bodies. Silence dressed up in Cyrillic letters. The sacred fire of the candlelight letter Ye, our and your freedom to rest in a land of love, like the broken trees of distant memory. That the history of a tribe with a Dodger rag in its mouth, routine chest filled with the grandparents and grandparents' lives, which we've carried for centuries as if shouldering the Carpathians. What have you got there, brothers? Asked our living. Clothes embroidered with the military chronicles and stretched out sweaters of rose, sloppy sketch mapping the new Europe, children's dust jackets of future books. What have you got there, brothers? Asked our mirrors. Copper coins of brass in our ripped pockets, the disquiet of ear in the broken frames of our mouths, the pulsing streaks of time in our eyes.
Thank you, Iya. Deborah?
Thank you. Thank you, Iya. Thank you, Olga, Eugeny, and of course, our co-chairs, Natalya and Elissa. Your presentations challenge us to imagine anew, to think anew. So thank you again. Please stay safe and stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.